series headed back to NYC. Cleveland wakes up after a sleepy game one and absolutely puts their foot down in game two. 107-90. This one never in doubt. The Cavs led by as many as 29. And you can call this one the Garland game as he leads the way. 32 points for the Cavs. The Knicks, meantime, shooting at a woeful 36% from the field. Diving in with our NBA insider, Bill Reiter. Bill, interesting action here across the East. Let's start with the Knicks and the Cavs right there. Completely different teams than we saw in game one. Let's go Cleveland first here. What impressed you most about this really physical performance that they put on tape?
You said it, the competitive spirit and the defense of this team. I think you saw two of the three things that, for me, makes the Cavaliers a sneaky team to keep an eye on for a potential deep postseason run. They obviously have to get past the Knicks first. And two of the three reasons that's the case were on display in this game. One is the defense, second best defensive rating in the game. Joe, as you mentioned, they are not just defensively excellent. They are tough. They are physical. The second thing they do so well is their depth. They got points from a lot of guys, contributions from a lot of guys. You mentioned Darius Garland. He was the big engine for the offense. And the third thing, which wasn't really necessary today, is how good Donovan Mitchell can be when they need him to take over games. They didn't need it in this game. The fact that they won this game without his offensive firepower being the dominant part of the offense, the fact they held the Knicks to 90 points, the response, I just think it speaks to how dangerous this team is. There's a lot of good teams in the NBA. I feel like the Cavs, and the GM was just texting this with me, are one of the more underrated teams from the level they're at. They're a top 6 or 7 team.
Yeah, we saw a couple different legs of the 8 here on Spida, 17 and 13. So doing it in a different way, but we sort of talked about it off camera. Big-time performances on visiting teams at Madison Square Garden. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's talk about these Knicks. Concern here in a lack of a counterpunch? I mean, you go down early and never really work their way back into this game, or is it more 1-1, we got one on the road, we're heading back home?
All right, here's the required caveat for the angry Knicks fans who remember the things I've said about. I understand I have doubted the Knicks all year. I have doubted Jalen Brunson. I have been wrong on both fronts. So Knicks fans, maybe I'm wrong here as well. I just don't think the Knicks are as good in the same tier as the Cleveland Cavaliers. They are obviously, New York, excellent offensively, and Brunson has been phenomenal, especially when Julius Randle's been out there with him. But even though it's a Tom Thibodeau team, they're just mediocre defensively, middle of the pack defensive rating. And when it comes to Cleveland, everything Cleveland does, I think the issue is Cleveland's a better basketball team. I think this is a regression to the mean. Yes, New York stole home court advantage. They've got that first game. Maybe it's a long series. Maybe it's a battle. I think what we saw, Joe, tonight is much more indicative of the gulf, at least for me, between the Cavs and the Knicks. I personally think the Cavs are a better team by a little bit of a margin, and I think that came out in this game.
Most certainly defensively, and that top-end scoring here proving to be an advantage for Cleveland in Game 2. Let's go to this other Eastern Conference matchup that we saw here on Tuesday. Hawks-Celtics. I won't write the obituary, but history says we should. Hawks 0-20 all-time when trailing 0-2 in a 7-game series. So let's not compare the Celtics and what we've seen to their current opponent. Let's compare them to the rest of the Eastern Conference right now. What have they shown you through 2 games that either makes you feel heartened by them or worry about them as we head forward here in the playoffs?
Yeah, it's a great question. I thought entering this postseason that maybe you could make an argument that the Bucks and the Celtics were in a class to themselves in the East, and I think that's wrong, in part because of the uncertainty surrounding Giannis Antetokounmpo in the back and obviously what that does for Milwaukee. Well, let's just take Boston, as you said. They're the only team in the NBA in the top 3 in offensive rating and defensive rating. They're incredibly deep. Malcolm Brogdon's probably going to be the 6th man of the year, and I think people haven't paid attention. That's a former 50, 40, 90 guy. His efficiency off the bench is so important. We know Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are part of that team. They're obviously extremely well coached under Joe Mazzulla. The reality is that this is the best team probably in the NBA because it's really hard to assess what the Suns are, certainly in the Eastern Conference. And with all respect to the Hawks, whose obituary I will write if we want to do that, I think what you're seeing is a dominant basketball team, a 2 seed that's obviously playing like a 1 seed, playing a team that was a play-in team for a reason.
You know, I get it. It could be the best team in the Eastern Conference, and that's a problem here for the Hawks, but you got to look at the go-getters. You got to look at the guys you point to in moments like this. Last 9 playoff games, the Hawks have lost 8 of them. 7 of those losses have come by double digits. You look to the guy at the top. Trae Young, for the 2nd straight game in this series, very inefficient from the floor. 9 of 22 in this one. What's wrong with Trae right now? Because when you are facing a better team, it's got to be, Trey, go get us 30, go get us 40.
There's a few things going on here. And by the way, I wrote obituaries in an early life at the Chicago Tribune as an intern.
I probably read a few.
I did them every day. So I'm happy to write one for the Atlanta Hawks, at least this version right now. Let's get into a few things. One, Hawks fans know it's been a pretty inefficient year for Trae Young anyway, and he's playing the best, I think, defensive team in the NBA, especially when you talk on the perimeter and the ability, Marcus Smart and other guys, to just be physical with a guy like Trae Young. Two, and this is still true even though Quinn Snyder has been hired and tried to fix this, and I reported this several weeks ago, this is an Atlanta Hawks organization where there's not a lot of love lost between Trae Young and some of his teammates, and those bad vibes will always come all out in the playoffs. You can hide them sometimes a little bit over 82 games. You can't hide them in the postseason, especially against a team like the Boston Celtics. So you take the fact these guys don't get along, which impacts on floor performance, the fact Trae Young's been off a little bit in terms of his shooting this year, and the fact he's going up against a Celtics team that's really good at focusing on one guy and making that guy have other people help out, and the guys that Trae Young's trying to involve don't really love playing with Trae Young, it adds up to a mess.
Here lie the Hawks. We have only just begun, but soon it will be over for some. Bill Reiter, we appreciate you as always. All right, here's a look at what's coming on Wednesday. Lakers, Grizz, question marks there around Ja Morant's availability. Heat, Bucks, question mark around Giannis's availability as he heads into that one doubtful. We know Tyler Hero is a no-go. Could be back by the finals. Gonna have to take a long look at the Heat and their possibilities of getting there. Bucks 6-point favorites despite no Giannis. T-Wolves, Nuggets, your nightcap with the Nuggets 8-point favorites after a no contest in Game 1.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.